For decades, Joseph Murphy's The Power of Your Subconscious Mind has been championed as a spiritual guide, a metaphysical blueprint for shaping reality through thought, emotion, and belief. It's been shelved next to classic texts in positive thinking and the so-called law of attraction. Millions have repeated its phrases, highlighted its chapters, and built routines around its principles. But there's a problem. Those routines often produce unpredictable results. Sometimes the teachings feel miraculous, leading to breakthroughs, opportunities, healing, and transformations that defy conventional logic. Other times, nothing happens. You recite the affirmations. You visualize the outcome. You feel the desire with all your heart. And yet reality seems unmoved, unchanged, silent. This inconsistency isn't due to lack of faith or effort. It's due to a fundamental misreading of Murphy's work. Because Joseph Murphy wasn't teaching law of attraction in the modern pop spiritual sense. He wasn't suggesting that thoughts magnetically pull events toward you like some cosmic vending machine. He was outlining something deeper, something far more technical, and, in hindsight, astonishingly aligned with today's evolving understanding of quantum mechanics. Murphy's teachings, when examined through a scientific lens, appear to describe interactions not between thoughts and things, but between consciousness and probabilistic fields. In other words, he wasn't teaching manifestation in the classical sense. He was describing identity-based resonance with available futures. Not attraction, but resolution. Not mystical laws, but energetic mechanics. This video is not about motivation, feel-good platitudes, or recycled manifestation hacks. This is about decoding a powerful synthesis where ancient wisdom meets modern quantum logic. We're going to unpack 12 key revelations from Joseph Murphy's writings and reinterpret them using frameworks from quantum theory, systems thinking, and information dynamics. You'll see why affirmations only work under certain emotional conditions. Why Murphy's most powerful techniques deal with identity, not desire. How feelings act as frequency signatures. And how Murphy may have unknowingly described concepts like quantum entanglement, waveform collapse, and timeline selection long before those terms entered the mainstream. This is not a stretch. This is not about overlaying science where it doesn't belong. This is about aligning Murphy's original language with concepts now understood in physics, neuroscience, and nonlinear dynamics. Once you see the mechanics behind the metaphysics, everything changes. You no longer hope something might happen. You understand how it happens. So if you've ever felt that there's a missing piece in your practice, if you've followed Murphy's methods but sensed there's a deeper layer, one that goes beyond belief and into precision, stay with this. What you're about to hear will rewire how you think about consciousness, reality, and your own creative power in the quantum field. Let's begin where most readers completely miss the point. Murphy's book is filled with phrases that seem metaphysical on the surface. Assume the feeling, impress the subconscious. What you believe you shall receive. Most readers interpret this as a call to believe harder, to repeat phrases until the mind is convinced, to overlay positive thoughts over negative circumstances. But that's not what's actually happening beneath the surface. The missing layer is energetic coherence. Murphy never explicitly used the language of fields or frequencies, but his teachings orbit around them. When he speaks about impressing the subconscious, what he's really pointing to is resonance. A specific alignment of your inner state, your emotions, beliefs, nervous system, with a potential version of reality that already exists within a larger field of probabilities. Here's where quantum logic becomes essential. In quantum physics, there's no such thing as a fixed outcome until observation occurs. What exists instead is a superposition, a field of possibilities. Each potential version of reality exists in probability space. When an observation is made, or in this case, when your consciousness enters a specific coherent frequency, one of those potentials resolves into experience. It doesn't appear because you attracted it. It resolves because your state matched it. Murphy's idea of belief is not about mental repetition. It's about reaching a level of coherence where there's no interference in your energetic field, no contradiction between thought, feeling, and identity. He understood that mere repetition was useless without emotional congruence. That's why he emphasized feeling the end result as already real. Not just thinking it, not just speaking it, feeling it. That emotional charge isn't ornamental. It's the tuning key. Let's put this in quantum terms. In a probabilistic field, potential outcomes exist as latent possibilities. These outcomes are not waiting to be summoned. They are waiting to be resolved. But the field doesn't respond to intellectual hope. It responds to frequency patterns. Your consciousness emits a signal through your dominant emotional tone, embodied beliefs, and internal narrative loops. This signal either matches the informational pattern of a potential reality, or it doesn't. When there is mismatch, no resolution occurs. When there is resonance, collapse happens. This is not metaphor. This is mechanics. Murphy intuitively described this when he wrote, "Change your thoughts, and you change your destiny." But again, this isn't about random mental substitution. It's about changing the vibratory template of your consciousness. And that only happens when your thoughts, emotions, and internal expectations are aligned in harmony. That's the equation that's missing in most interpretations of his work. And here's where most fail. They speak affirmations while harboring unresolved emotional incoherence. They visualize abundance while fearing lack. They construct mental images disconnected from somatic congruence. And in doing so, they broadcast a distorted signal, one that the quantum field cannot lock onto cleanly. So they wait. They try harder. They blame the technique. They assume they need more repetition, more desire, more discipline. But it's not about more of anything. It's about refinement, precision, clarity of state. Now, let's trace Murphy's language further. He repeatedly spoke of impressing the subconscious, as if imprinting an energetic pattern. But why is this necessary? Because the subconscious mind, in Murphy's framework, acts as the gateway between conscious intention and the field of manifestation. In quantum terms, we might say, the subconscious regulates the carrier wave. It ensures that what you consciously desire does not contradict your energetic baseline. And if it does contradict, then the signal fails to propagate. Murphy didn't advocate wishful thinking. He taught that belief, real, felt, emotionally anchored belief, is what creates results. Not because belief is magical, but because belief is the signal. The felt certainty of an outcome is the electromagnetic instruction to the probabilistic field. Let's be clear. This is not about metaphysical belief. It's about signal fidelity. Your emotional state is not a side effect. It's the modulator. So the key question becomes, how coherent is your field? If your thoughts speak success but your body tightens in anxiety, if you visualize abundance while secretly fearing scarcity, if you affirm worthiness but feel shame, the result is decoherence. The field receives a scrambled message. The resolution never completes. The quantum outcome remains uncollapsed. And so the life you want stays on the shelf. A potential unreleased. Murphy hinted at this again and again. His stories of healing, prosperity, and change weren't just about mental habits. They were about shifting into a new identity so completely that the field had no choice but to reorganize itself accordingly. That is quantum alignment, not attraction. In short, belief alone isn't enough. Only when belief is supported by emotional coherence and subconscious resonance does it become causally active. Otherwise, it's just noise. So the next time you encounter a teaching from Murphy about believing in your good or assuming the feeling, don't treat it as poetic optimism. Treat it as instruction. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing the technical process of reality selection. He just didn't have the language of quantum physics to explain it. Next, we will break open the mystery behind why affirmations work spectacularly in some cases and completely fail in others. The answer lies not in repetition, but in the hidden logic of resonance, nervous system imprinting, and timeline specificity. Let's decode that quantum reason. There's a moment nearly everyone faces on this journey. You've read the books. You've learned the techniques. You start repeating affirmations every morning and night, holding the image of your desired outcome in mind. You've committed to speaking success, health, abundance, or love into existence. And sometimes, something incredible happens. Reality responds. You land the opportunity, the call comes through, your body heals, or a long-desired shift takes form seemingly out of nowhere. The system worked. The affirmation, it seems, activated a result. But then the pattern breaks. You repeat a new affirmation. This time for a different desire. And nothing happens. No shift. No change. The field stays quiet. And you begin to question it all. Was it a fluke? Did I lose faith? Did I miss a step? This confusion has created more frustration and abandonment of these practices than any other factor. But here's the reality no one tells you. Affirmations don't work because of repetition. They work when repetition creates resonance. And if that resonance doesn't occur, nothing happens. Let's decode this with absolute clarity. In Murphy's world, affirmations are not meant to be wishful incantations. They are precision tools designed to shape the inner state so that it matches a specific energetic frequency. Not conceptually, viscerally. The affirmation, then, is not a magic spell. It's an alignment directive, a signal calibration. It only becomes effective once it alters the electromagnetic coherence of your being. Repetition is a delivery mechanism, but it is not the power source. This is why one person may repeat an affirmation 1,000 times and get no result, while another speaks it once with total conviction and emotional congruence and experiences a shift. It's not about quantity. It's about clarity and internal signal strength. Now, bring in the quantum model. The quantum field doesn't care what you say. It's not listening to your words. It's responding to the encoded vibrational pattern your consciousness is producing. That pattern is constructed through your emotions, your embodied memories, your nervous system tone, and your subconscious identity structure. Affirmations that don't reach this structure are filtered out. They remain cognitive noise, flat signals like static trying to pass for music. The field cannot resolve them into a timeline because there's no clean signature to collapse. Let's go deeper. Your nervous system plays a central role in this. It is the interface between your consciousness and your body. It registers safety, familiarity, threat, and possibility. If your affirmation threatens the current identity set point, the nervous system will reject it. And if it rejects it, no matter how many times you speak it, the field will not stabilize around it. This is why saying, "I am wealthy," while feeling financially unsafe doesn't work. The subconscious registers that as a lie. The nervous system tightens. Your field becomes incoherent. The signal is broken. But when you say, "I am wealthy," and your system feels calm, congruent, grounded, and emotionally resonant with that truth, then the field receives a clear instruction. That instruction has mass. It has voltage. And the probabilistic outcome of wealth now has a matching receiver signal in you. This is what creates collapse into a new timeline. Not the statement. The state. Murphy was pointing to this long ago. His constant emphasis on feeling the reality as if it were already true wasn't poetic. It was instructional. He understood that only through felt reality could the subconscious be imprinted. And only through subconscious imprinting could the field reorganize. The affirmation is a sculpting tool, not a generator. It sculpts the internal field, clarifies the intention. But unless that sculpting process leads to resonance, it never connects to the broader informational substrate that determines outcome resolution. Let's give this more precision. Think of reality as a signal network. Your desired outcome exists as a specific frequency band. That band carries emotional signatures, belief codes, identity markers, and behavioral traits. If your current field doesn't emit a matching signal, there is no link. Affirmations help tune your system toward that band, but only if you are willing to emotionally inhabit them. This is why robotic affirmations don't work. This is why reading from a list passively doesn't shift anything. Because unless the emotion matches the statement, you're emitting one frequency while trying to receive another. It's like trying to tune into 95.5 FM while broadcasting on 103.3. The result? Static, silence, confusion. But here's the shift most never make. It's not about forcing belief in the affirmation. It's about calibrating the nervous system to accept it as real. That calibration happens through repetition with emotion, visualization with immersion, language with bodily congruence. Murphy knew this. He taught that the subconscious was impressionable in states of relaxed awareness. such as just before sleep or after waking. That's because in those moments, the analytical mind, the gatekeeper, is quiet. And in that openness, affirmations bypass the filter and reach the feeling body. That's when the tuning happens. That's when the field receives the signal. And once the signal is coherent, consistent, and emotionally charged, probability begins to shift. Outcomes reorganize. Timelines realign. So the question is never, did I say it enough? The question is, did I feel it as true enough to change my state? Because your current state is the broadcast, and your future is just a reflection of what that signal has selected. Let's be direct. The most misunderstood concept in Murphy's teachings is belief. Readers often latch onto the idea that belief is everything, that if you can just believe hard enough, long enough, results will follow. But this creates a subtle trap. It leads to people trying to believe their way into a reality they still feel separate from. And that separation, even if it's microscopic, destroys coherence. Murphy's real focus wasn't belief. It was identity. And here's the truth that redefines everything. You do not manifest outcomes by attracting them from outside of you. You experience outcomes by collapsing into the identity that already lives in resonance with that outcome. This is the mechanics of quantum superposition. In quantum physics, a particle exists in multiple potential states simultaneously until observation causes a collapse into one definite state. Each state has its own set of probabilities. Now apply that to self-concept. You are not a fixed self. You are a quantum superposition of identities. Each version of you, confident, anxious, wealthy, struggling, loving, guarded, exists in probability space. And whichever version you feel as real is the one that collapses into experience. Not because you willed it, but because your consciousness selected it through resonance. Murphy said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. He didn't say hope for it. He didn't say force belief. He said assume. An assumption is identity-based. You don't assume something with logic. You assume it by becoming it internally, by aligning your emotions, actions, and narrative to that version of yourself as if it were already active. That's the key, internal activation. Identity collapse happens when the current self-structure can no longer support the old pattern, and a new structure with new codes and emotions becomes the dominant frequency. That's what causes quantum timelines to shift. Not effort, not hope, identity. So when Murphy speaks of belief, what he's really pointing to is self-image. He was obsessed with the idea of reprogramming the subconscious with new beliefs, not because beliefs are ideas, but because beliefs are the architecture of identity. Change your belief and you change your self-perception. Change your self-perception and you change the frequency you emit. Change the frequency you emit and the field collapses a different outcome. This is why affirmations are only useful when they reorganize identity. Otherwise, they're just noise. Let's go even deeper. The identity collapse process requires letting go of the old signal. The problem is, the ego is deeply attached to the current story. It's emotionally addicted to familiar emotions, like worry, guilt, striving, or being unseen. These patterns are magnetic. They have mass, and they hold your signal in place. To shift identity, you must interrupt the energetic addiction to the old self. This means changing what you expect, how you breathe, how you speak to yourself, and even the energetic set point of your nervous system. That's not just mental work. That's somatic. That's frequency calibration. Murphy never described it in these terms, but he was pointing to it. His descriptions of healing weren't based on fighting illness. They were based on embodying health so completely that illness had no signal to attach to. That's identity resolution. That's state-based healing. He wasn't saying you believe your way out of suffering. He was saying you become the version of you that never had it. And in doing so, the quantum field responds. This is why sudden shifts can happen once the emotional signature flips. It's not because of cosmic rewards, it's because of quantum mechanics. The new identity carries a different resonance, and the field resolves a new outcome accordingly. So let this be clear. Belief is a doorway. Identity is the architecture. Feeling is the frequency. When all three align, collapse occurs. The field doesn't hesitate. It doesn't deliberate. It resolves immediately. You don't attract a better life. You align with the version of you who's already living it. Next, we will move beyond the outdated attraction model entirely and uncover a startling truth. You never manifest a timeline, you phase into it. And Joseph Murphy almost told you that himself. There's a deeply embedded misconception within most personal development teachings. One that subtly reinforces separation, effort, and the illusion that reality is out there waiting to be earned or summoned. This is the idea that you must attract what you desire, that it lives outside you, that it moves closer when your thoughts become magnetic enough. This framework is false. You don't manifest a timeline the way you manifest a physical object. You phase into a timeline by becoming the version of yourself who already occupies that state of being. And this isn't just semantics, it's the core difference between wishful thinking and quantum reality engineering. Murphy was closer to this than most people ever realized. He constantly emphasized the immediacy of assumption, the requirement to feel as if your desire was already true. He didn't say you had to pull the future toward you. He said you had to step into it energetically. That's not attraction. That's phasing. Let's make this concrete. In quantum mechanics, reality is not one linear path moving from past to future. Instead, it is a web of probabilities, an ever-branching field of potential states. Each potential version of your life already exists as a waveform, encoded in that field. Which one you experience depends not on effort, time, or worthiness, but on the frequency signature of your current consciousness. And here's where the shift occurs. When you change your inner state, your emotions, assumptions, and self-image, you are not gradually moving toward a better future. You are selecting a new coordinate in the field. You are phasing into a timeline that already exists because your signal matches its signature. This is instantaneous from the perspective of the field. Only your perception, tethered to old time-bound thinking, makes it feel gradual. In truth, once resonance is achieved, the shift has already occurred. What follows is the unfolding of perception catching up to that signal selection. This completely reframes what it means to create your reality. You are not a builder stacking blocks toward a goal. You are a tuner adjusting frequency until a specific station comes online. And that tuning happens at the level of identity, not effort. Murphy said this without saying it. He used words like assumption, acceptance, emotionalized belief, and feeling the reality now. All of those are descriptions of frequency matching, of collapsing into a timeline, not by waiting for it to appear, but by matching the signal of the version of you who's already there. And that is what causes the shift. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of phasing. Your consciousness broadcasts a dominant frequency based on your self-perception. That frequency intersects with the quantum field, a probabilistic matrix of outcomes, events, and states. When the field receives your signal, it collapses the probabilities that resonate with it. This means timelines aren't attracted. They're resolved. You don't pull success toward you. You shift into the version of you who always had it. The field responds not to your desires, but to your identity. This is why desire, when unaccompanied by embodiment, is powerless. Desire alone reinforces separation. It tells the field, "This is not who I am yet." And that message, transmitted through emotion and expectation, locks you out of the timeline you claim to want. But assumption sends the opposite message. It says, "This is who I am now." And when that message is stable, emotionally grounded, unconsciously accepted, the field responds accordingly. Not out of favoritism or magic, but because the identity you inhabit is a match to a real configuration already encoded in the system. Murphy captured this truth, though he lacked the vocabulary of physics to articulate it fully. He spoke often of the importance of living from the end, of moving, speaking, and feeling as the person who already has the outcome. And again, that's not a motivational tactic, it's the literal requirement for phase shift. You don't attract, you align. You don't summon, you select. You don't hope, you inhabit. And once that version of you becomes the dominant signal, when the old self is no longer the reference point, the external world begins to reorganize around your new frequency. What you call manifestation is simply perceptual convergence with the timeline you now embody. Let's clarify this further. Phasing is not mental fantasy. It is a biological and energetic event. Your nervous system must feel safe enough to accept the new identity. Your body must regulate to the emotional tone of the new timeline. Your mind must stop referencing the old evidence. That's when phase coherence occurs. That's when the signal stabilizes. Murphy's teachings implied this. His stories of healing and transformation always involved a moment of full acceptance, when the person no longer questioned whether it was real. They simply knew it. They felt it. They moved through life as if it was already so. That knowing was the signal. That's what did the work. And this reveals the real reason timelines don't shift. Partial identity. When you believe one thing, feel another, and behave as if nothing has changed, your signal is scrambled. The field receives incoherent data, and incoherence cannot resolve a singular outcome. It only sustains ambiguity. To phase into a new timeline, your frequency must become unanimous. No contradiction, no subtle resistance, no silent waiting. Only then does the version of you that matches that signal become the center of gravity. And when it does, everything around you reorganizes not through magic, but through field alignment. Murphy knew this. He just didn't call it quantum mechanics. But you can. And once you do, you stop trying to attract timelines like prizes, and you begin selecting them like coordinates. Prayer is one of the most ancient and universal human practices. Across cultures, languages, and philosophies, the act of focused intention, often directed toward a higher intelligence, has been a central method of seeking change, guidance, or healing. But behind the rituals and traditions lies a principle that science is only beginning to understand. The mechanism behind effective prayer may not be mystical at all. It may be quantum, and Joseph Murphy was describing it word for word. To most readers, Murphy's teaching on prayer feels spiritual. He uses language like divine intelligence, infinite mind, and inner certainty. But when we break it down with precision, we find that his model of prayer mirrors the structure of quantum entanglement, and understanding this reframes everything. Here's the core principle. Murphy said prayer works not when you beg, plead, or request, but when you assume the outcome is already done and feel it with full confidence. He emphasized emotional alignment, mental clarity, and inner knowing, and he insisted that prayer must end with gratitude, not anxiety. This is not religion. This is quantum protocol. In quantum entanglement, particles that interact become linked across space and time. A change in one immediately affects the other regardless of distance. This connection is not bound by linear causality. It operates through shared information fields. Now take that principle and apply it to consciousness. When you pray not from desperation, but from clarity, you entangle your awareness with a specific informational structure in the quantum field. That structure may represent healing, abundance, forgiveness, or peace. And when your consciousness becomes emotionally and energetically aligned with that pattern, the field begins to respond in real time. Prayer, then, is not a request. It is entangled resonance. You aren't speaking to something separate. You are tuning into a field configuration that already exists, and linking your consciousness to it through vibratory coherence. Murphy described this without physics. He wrote, "Prayer is the soul's sincere desire. It is the movement of your thought and feeling toward a desired result. That's entanglement. That's informational coupling. And when the signal is strong, clear, and uninterrupted by doubt, the field adjusts. This is not superstition. It's signal dynamics." Murphy warned that ineffective prayer is rooted in fear. When you pray while doubting, fearing, or resisting, you are splitting your signal. You are attempting to entangle with an outcome while emotionally affirming its absence. The result? The field remains unchanged. The pattern is rejected. Effective prayer, on the other hand, is signal unification. When you feel the result as already complete, when gratitude, peace, and certainty replace striving, that's when entanglement is successful. That's when the informational structure of the desired outcome becomes linked to your field. From there, the timeline begins to adjust. Murphy emphasized the importance of feeling during prayer. He said, Feeling is the secret of successful prayer. Not because emotion is dramatic, but because it carries the signal. Feeling is frequency, and the frequency you emit determines which patterns in the field you become entangled with. This is why certain prayers seem to work instantly, while others go unanswered. It has nothing to do with luck or divine preference. It has to do with signal quality. High coherence prayer, marked by gratitude, clarity, and identity alignment, creates strong entanglement. Low coherence prayer, marked by fear, urgency, or contradiction, creates distortion. Murphy said, "You must feel the response now. Assume the answer has already happened." This is not optimism. This is collapse mechanics. In that moment, the self who is praying becomes indistinguishable from the version who has received the answer. That is the identity merger required for outcome resolution. That is quantum entanglement expressed as inner certainty. The mistake people make is treating prayer as negotiation. They plead, they bargain, they beg. But this reinforces separation. It sends the message, "I am not yet connected to the outcome," and the field reflects that message. Murphy's version of prayer bypasses this entirely. He advocated for impersonal prayer, meaning you don't obsess over how or when the outcome happens. You trust the intelligence of the field. You establish resonance, and you let the mechanics unfold. This trust is not passive. It's vibrational. It allows the signal to stabilize long enough for the field to reorganize. It prevents the wobble that comes from overthinking, overwatching, and over-controlling. So let's be clear. Prayer is not superstition. It is signal emission. It is informational entanglement between consciousness and quantum potential. And Murphy, whether he knew it or not, was describing it in perfect detail. You are not hoping to be heard. You are choosing to become the signal that cannot be denied. That's not faith. That's physics. Next, we will move into the sleep space, where Murphy gave some of his most potent advice. And when we decode it through the quantum framework, we'll reveal why the hypnagogic state isn't just mental. It's a gateway to conscious timeline adjustment. Among Joseph Murphy's many techniques, none has sparked more intrigue than his advice surrounding sleep. He often said that the moments before drifting off were the most powerful for planting suggestions in the subconscious. To the average reader, this sounds metaphorical, perhaps even mystical, but that would be a mistake. This wasn't poetic advice. This was a direct pointer to one of the most sensitive and scientifically verified gateways in human consciousness, the hypnagogic window. And what Murphy was really pointing to, without using these terms, was the period of highest neuroplasticity and lowest conscious resistance. From a quantum standpoint, this is critical, because in the transition between wakefulness and sleep, your brainwaves shift from active beta and alpha states into slower theta frequencies. In this range, the filtering systems of the conscious mind begin to dissolve. The analytical firewall quiets, and what's left is a highly receptive state, one that allows direct imprinting into the subconscious field. Murphy understood this, even if the science wasn't yet available. He instructed people to repeat their affirmations, visualizations, and intentions while falling asleep, not because it was convenient, but because in that state, the signal you broadcast becomes exponentially more coherent. And coherence is everything. Let's break this down clearly. In your waking state, your brain acts as a filter. It constantly references past experiences, beliefs, traumas, doubts, and perceptions to interpret new input. This filtration system limits the penetration of new information, especially if it contradicts your current identity. This is why affirmations spoken during the day often fall flat. They're bouncing off a guarded system. The gatekeeper is wide awake, analyzing every statement, searching for evidence, assessing credibility. But as you fall asleep, the gatekeeper goes silent. The critical mind releases its grip. And in that moment, a direct channel opens between conscious intention and subconscious encoding. Murphy's advice to impress the subconscious at night was built on this truth. But there's more. From a quantum perspective, your internal frequency determines the signal you emit into the probabilistic field. And during the hypnagogic state, your emotional and energetic patterns become magnified. Your system is no longer being overridden by stress, distraction, or contradiction. It becomes centered, still, open. That stillness allows for higher fidelity signal transmission. Think of it like a radio signal being broadcast in a quiet canyon. No interference, no competing noise, just pure, focused frequency. This is why Murphy advised that you repeat the statement of your desired reality as you drift into unconsciousness. Because your last conscious thoughts set the tone for the subconscious processing that continues throughout the night. And that tone is what the field responds to. Let's go even deeper. During sleep, your body enters a state of repair and regeneration. But your consciousness continues to operate at non-conscious levels. The subconscious isn't dormant. It's active, sorting, filing, organizing, and rehearsing patterns based on what it has received. So when you give it an instruction, especially one wrapped in emotional clarity and repetition, it integrates that instruction as part of your operational baseline. And when that integration stabilizes, it becomes the dominant frequency your system transmits the next day. This is how identity change begins. Not through force, but through consistent nocturnal suggestion, accepted without resistance. Murphy said, "As you sow in your subconscious mind, so shall you reap in your body and environment." And in the moments before sleep, your sowing tool is sharper than ever. The key, however, is precision. It's not enough to repeat vague wishes. The subconscious responds best to emotionally charged, specific, and simple statements. It needs clarity, it needs consistency, and it needs resonance. That's when imprinting becomes effective. For example, saying, "I am successful half-heartedly," while feeling like a failure, creates distortion. But saying it with breath, with presence, and while relaxed, begins to create alignment. Over time, that alignment crystallizes into identity. And identity always precedes outcome. This is not theoretical. Studies in neuroplasticity confirm that the brain reprograms most efficiently during theta-dominant states, especially when suggestions are emotionally potent. And quantum biology is now beginning to validate that coherent emotional states can affect biological and energetic systems beyond the body. Murphy was years ahead of this. He repeatedly urged his readers not to focus on the external. He told them to go within, to sleep with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and to trust the inner process. That wasn't mysticism. That was frequency coding. That was field navigation. Let's also address a subtle but critical point. Many people carry unresolved anxiety into sleep. They ruminate, worry, rehearse worst-case scenarios, and then they wonder why their days are filled with resistance and chaos. The answer is simple. They're broadcasting destructive signals into the subconscious, night after night. And the subconscious doesn't judge. It executes. Murphy warned against this. He insisted that the mood in which you fall asleep sets the tone for everything that follows. And from a quantum standpoint, that's exactly right. Your last state becomes your base frequency. And your base frequency determines what outcomes become accessible. So the practice is this. Create a short, emotionally potent statement that reflects your desired identity, not your desire. Say it slowly with feeling as you fall asleep. Don't try to control the outcome. Just saturate your inner world with that signal. And repeat it night after night until the frequency takes hold. Once it does, the field will begin to reflect it back. Not because you earned it, but because you became it. Murphy's sleep method isn't spiritual fluff. It's a neurological, psychological, and quantum alignment tool. And it works because it bypasses the filters and speaks directly to the only part of you that can shift the timeline. The identity field. Time is not what you've been taught. For most, time is experienced as a straight line, a sequence of events from past to future, marked by memory and anticipation. But this view of time is deeply limited. It locks you into causality. It makes you a prisoner of the past. And it makes change feel distant, delayed, and dependent on external progress. Murphy understood a different truth. He taught that reality could shift instantly, that by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled now, you could experience rapid change, not because of effort but because of alignment. At the time, this seemed magical, but from a modern quantum view, it's logical. Linear time is an illusion of perception. not a law of nature. In quantum physics, all possible states of reality exist simultaneously. Time, as experienced linearly, is simply a function of how your consciousness moves through those states. In other words, the future isn't something you move toward. It's something you access based on signal match. And this completely validates Murphy's advice. He repeatedly said, "Live as though it were already true." He told his readers to speak, think, and feel from the end result, not toward it. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was timeline access through consciousness. Let's clarify. Each timeline, each possible version of your life already exists. They are not created from scratch. They are activated based on your vibrational identity. When your inner world matches the frequency of a desired outcome, your consciousness phases into that timeline. Not gradually, instantly. The sense of gradual unfolding is simply your nervous system adjusting to the new reference point. But in the field, the change is immediate. That's why breakthroughs can seem to happen all at once, because they do. Murphy's insistence on immediacy points to this. He said not to beg or ask repeatedly, because that implied separation. Instead, he advised, claim it now. And by doing so, you shorten the gap between desire and experience, not through action, but through perception shift. Now consider this. If time is nonlinear, then the version of you who already has what you desire exists now. That self is not distant. It is accessible. And the only thing separating you from that self is signal disparity. You're not waiting for time to pass. You're waiting for coherence. The moment you achieve it, the field adjusts. Your perception changes. Events reorganize. Not because time moved forward, but because your consciousness moved sideways into a new timeline. Murphy's methods support this. He used mental rehearsal not as fantasy, but as access. By rehearsing the end state with emotional truth, he was enabling people to shift reference frames. And once that frame stabilizes, your external world reflects it. This is why people report miraculous changes after long periods of stagnation. It's not because they finally did enough. It's because they finally became the version of themselves that matches the new timeline. And that shift isn't governed by time. It's governed by state. Murphy said, "Whatever you impress on your subconscious mind is expressed on the screen of space. That screen, what you call reality, is not unfolding linearly. It's shifting in relation to the frequency you maintain. When that frequency changes, the events, people, and conditions in your life shift accordingly. This is why change can feel sudden. You're not climbing a staircase. You're stepping through doorways. Each doorway is a timeline. Each timeline is a pattern. And each pattern responds to the signal you're broadcasting now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but this very instant. So stop waiting. Stop imagining that time is the missing ingredient. Time doesn't cause change. Change causes new experiences of time. Murphy was pointing to this long before science had the tools to describe it. He was telling you that you didn't need to move through time to reach your goals. You needed to reach the state that contains those goals already. And once you do, time will reorganize itself to support that state. Your past won't define you. Your future won't be delayed. Your present will be the access point to everything. Next, we will address a subtle but powerful distortion Murphy warned about: why desire, when uncontrolled, becomes a block rather than a bridge to manifestation. And why precision is the forgotten key to resolving the field cleanly. Desire is a double-edged signal. Used properly, it can catalyze inner clarity, energize your system, and stabilize a resonant frequency that matches a timeline of fulfillment. But used unconsciously, desire becomes noise. And that noise blocks signal resolution in the quantum field. Murphy never condemned desire itself. He emphasized its role. But what he did warn against again and again was attachment to desire. Craving, longing, emotional tension. He knew what most missed. The moment desire is laced with desperation, the system enters decoherence. And decoherence destroys alignment. Let's unpack this with precision. The quantum field does not respond to your wants. It responds to your state. That state, encoded through emotional tone, self-image, and internal narrative, communicates with the informational substrate beneath physical experience. So when desire becomes intense longing, the field receives a different signal than what you intended. You may be thinking, I want this outcome, but what you're broadcasting is, I lack this outcome. And the quantum field is not reading your words. It's reading your signal fidelity. That's why Murphy insisted on relaxing into the assumption of success. He warned that stress, fear, or obsessive attention to the desire would short-circuit the process, because those emotions emit a frequency of absence, not presence. To the field, it's binary. Either your frequency reflects the outcome as real or it doesn't. This is where precision enters the picture. Desire becomes effective when it sharpens identity, not when it amplifies craving. Precision means becoming clear about what version of yourself lives within the desired reality, what beliefs they hold, what emotions they normalize, what internal stories they operate from. Once you identify that version of yourself with clarity, you don't need to want the outcome anymore. You simply become the one who already lives inside it. Murphy's phrase, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, was an instruction in energetic precision. He didn't say, hold the desire intensely. He said to inhabit the outcome now. That's how the frequency stabilizes. Desire is just the initial spark. Precision is the mechanism. Here's what that means on a practical level. Let's say your desire is financial freedom. Desire, in raw form, says, I want to be financially free. But precision asks, what identity lives inside financial freedom? It asks, how does that version of me think, feel, choose, and move? Now you're no longer desiring from lack, you're selecting a configuration from within the field. And when your emotional, somatic, and cognitive systems align with that configuration, the field begins to reorganize itself around you. That reorganization is not based on the intensity of your wanting. It's based on the clarity of your becoming. Murphy knew this. He warned that intense emotional strain around a desire would create resistance. Not because emotion is bad, but because undirected emotion creates static. It blurs the signal. It disrupts identity coherence. That's the key. Desire only activates when it moves from emotional noise into frequency clarity. Let's break that down further. Incoherent desire sounds like this. I hope this happens. I really need this. I don't know how, but I have to get it. This is desperation. It broadcasts uncertainty, separation, and lack. The identity behind that message is one of disempowerment. Coherent precision sounds like this. This outcome is natural for who I am now. I live in a reality where this is already true. I trust the signal. This communicates certainty. It broadcasts resolution. The identity here is one of congruence and inner authority. The quantum field responds to the second, because only the second transmits a stable waveform. Murphy's warnings about fear-based or overly intense prayer were warnings about field distortion. He saw that emotional excess without precision created energetic conflict. The subconscious picked up on the contradiction and aborted the alignment. So how do you correct this? You stop relating to desire as an outside force. You stop fueling emotional tension. And you begin using desire as a pointer, not to something external, but to the version of you who already aligns with it internally. You treat desire as a map, not a demand. And then you calibrate. This means adjusting your language, reframing your inner story, changing the mood you associate with your goals, and releasing the need to monitor, check, or over-control the unfolding. Murphy taught this in every case study he shared. He showed how people succeeded not by effort, but by emotional relaxation, identity resolution, and inner congruence. His most powerful healings came when people let go of the tension and slipped into a state of knowing. Desire without knowing equals anxiety. Desire with knowing equals alignment. Let's anchor this in quantum terms. When your system emits a signal of longing, the field receives uncertainty. It keeps that outcome in probability space, never resolving it because your current signal doesn't allow it to stabilize. But when your signal reflects completeness, the outcome collapses into form. Not because you forced it, because you stopped distorting it. Murphy was guiding people to this very pivot. He was teaching that desire must evolve into identity, and that the work is never to get the outcome, but to become the frequency of its inevitability. That's not magic. That's quantum resolution. Next, we shift from mechanics to method, and explore why Murphy placed so much emphasis on feeling. Not as a poetic idea, but as the literal encoding key to reality selection. This phrase appears again and again in Murphy's writings. Feeling is the secret. To most readers, it sounds like a motivational slogan, something meant to inspire deeper emotional connection. But that completely misses the point. Murphy wasn't making a poetic observation. He was identifying the core mechanism behind how outcomes resolve in the quantum field. And that mechanism is feeling, not in a casual sense, but in a very specific, precise, energetic sense. Feeling is the secret because feeling is the frequency. Thoughts are informational. Emotions are vibrational. And your dominant emotional state determines the carrier wave that transmits your identity into the field of probability. Let's get technical. Every emotion you feel has a measurable energetic signature. It changes your heart rate variability, brainwave coherence, hormonal profile, and nervous system tone. These internal changes create an outward signal, subtle, electromagnetic, and real. That signal, when stable, consistent, and emotionally rich, interacts with the quantum field. The field responds not to what you're thinking, but to what your system is broadcasting at the level of coherence. Murphy emphasized this. He instructed people to enter into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not just to imagine it, but to feel it as now. That wasn't metaphor. That was mechanics. He knew that unless the subconscious feels the new identity as emotionally real, it won't accept it. And if it won't accept it, it won't transmit it. And if it won't transmit it, the field won't resolve it. Feeling is the code. Let's make this tangible. You want to experience love. That desire isn't the signal. The signal is the feeling you associate with already being loved. If that feeling lives in your nervous system, if it becomes normalized, your signal matches a timeline where love is present. Same with wealth. Same with peace. Same with purpose. Feeling tells the field, this is real now. And the field says, okay, then here is the reality that matches. It is a vibrational conversation. And only feeling can hold the tone long enough for resolution to occur. But here's where most misapply this truth. They try to manufacture emotion. They fake it. They try to force elevated states. But the subconscious is not fooled. If your body is still rehearsing lack, fear, or doubt, your feeling signal is corrupted. The field gets interference. So what's the solution? You learn to shift state first, then engage intention. This means breathing differently, moving differently, speaking as if the outcome were already true. Not to convince the field, but to entrain your own system into emotional alignment. Once the feeling becomes authentic, once it lives in your body without resistance, you've accessed the frequency. You've found the key. And once that key is turned, the lock of probability opens. Murphy said, "You are what you feel you are, and you attract what you feel you are." Again, not poetry, physics. Your identity is embedded in your emotional baseline, and that baseline broadcasts nonstop. So if you want to change your life, you don't start with thoughts. You start with felt experience. You become the one who already knows, already trusts, already rests in the truth of the outcome. That's when your signal stabilizes. That's when collapse happens. That's when outcomes come, not because you chase them, but because you match them. Feeling is not secondary. Feeling is the filter. It is the delivery mechanism. The mistake most make is trying to shift outcomes while bypassing emotion. They think hard, visualize hard, work hard, but they feel the same. And so the field receives the old signal. And the old signal produces the same results. Murphy's genius was this: he showed that the shortcut to reality change wasn't external. It was internal saturation of the new frequency, delivered through emotion. So use this. Take your desire, translate it into a feeling. Install that feeling into your daily state. Repeat it until it becomes native to your identity. Then stop watching. Stop waiting. The field is already recalibrating. You don't need to chase the outcome. You need to stabilize the frequency. Next, we will correct the final misunderstanding of Murphy's legacy, why his teachings weren't magical or mythical at all. They were measurable, and you can track your alignment not by results but by reactions. It's tempting to read Joseph Murphy's work as mystical, full of phrases like infinite intelligence, divine mind, and miracle power, but framing it this way misses the essence. It creates a soft-focus image of Murphy as a preacher of abstract faith rather than a technician of precise transformation. That image is incomplete. Murphy wasn't inviting people to believe in magic. He was handing them a measurable system, a feedback loop, a way to observe the alignment between internal state and external experience, not by watching what shows up, but by noticing what you're becoming. And the key to that system is simple: reaction over result. Most people measure alignment by outcomes. They ask, did I get what I wanted? If the answer is no, they assume the process failed. They tweak affirmations, shift techniques, and double down on effort. But the outcomes don't matter, not at first. What matters is the signal. And that signal is revealed not by results, but by reactions. Let's break that down clearly. You have a baseline identity, a collection of emotions, beliefs, expectations, and inner narratives. This identity emits a frequency into the quantum field. That frequency interacts with a field of probabilities, which then collapses into specific experiences. When the field reorganizes around you, it does so in harmony with your signal, not your preferences, not your spoken affirmations, but the energetic profile you carry day to day. So how do you measure the quality of that signal? Not by what you manifest. That's downstream. You measure it by how you react to the world around you. Murphy hinted at this repeatedly. He said your reactions are your beliefs in motion. They show what you truly accept as real, what you emotionally expect, even if your words say otherwise. And the quantum field responds not to what you say, it responds to what you expect with emotional certainty. So if you say, I'm abundant, but feel tension around spending money, your reaction reveals your true signal. If you affirm love but react with defensiveness or fear in relationships, your nervous system is broadcasting lack. If you visualize health but panic at every symptom, the field receives a message of instability. Reactions are the mirror. They don't lie. They don't mask. They reflect your actual frequency with perfect fidelity. Murphy wanted people to track this, to stop chasing signs and start measuring coherence. Because once you understand that your reactions are feedback from your subconscious identity, you gain control over the alignment process. Let's go deeper. The field operates through resonance. That means attracts at the level of vibration, not thought. And vibration is stabilized by belief. So the moment your system reacts in a way that contradicts your conscious intention, you've revealed a fracture. That fracture must be addressed, not bypassed. This is why trying to manifest through force fails. You're speaking one frequency while living another. The field cannot resolve the contradiction. Keeps you suspended in ambiguity. So the question becomes, how do you shift? Not by demanding results, but by adjusting reactions. That means regulating your nervous system, rewriting the internal stories that drive your responses, normalizing the emotional state of the version of you who already lives in the desired timeline. Murphy's methods were built on this. He advised people to practice the feeling of the outcome, not once but constantly, to let the new state become so familiar that it replaced the old reflexes. And he warned that any reaction that contradicted the new identity would sustain the old pattern. Again, not magic measurement. Let's give this structure. There are 3 levels of feedback in Murphy's model. 1. Thought awareness, what narratives run on autopilot. 2. Emotional tone, what feelings dominate your daily state. 3. Reactive behavior, how do you respond under pressure. These are your dials, your data points. They show whether your system is aligned with the timeline you claim to desire or still entrenched in an old one. So if you want to measure your manifestation progress, don't look at your bank account. Look at how you feel about it. Look at whether fear still arises or whether trust has become the new default. If you want to know whether love is near, don't look for signs. Look at whether you still brace for disappointment or whether your nervous system expects connection. That's measurement. That's Murphy's system in action. And it's reliable, because once you shift your reactions, your identity shifts. Once identity shifts, your frequency changes. And once the frequency changes, the field must respond. That's law. Murphy's genius was in teaching people how to create that shift internally, before any external confirmation. He trained people to become the new self first, to use thought and feeling as instruments of transformation, not to influence the world directly, but to reshape their identity. From there, the field takes care of the rest. So stop looking for magic. Start tracking your signal. And remember, the way you react is the life you're reinforcing. Next, we'll decode Murphy's definition of faith, not as passive hope, but as a precise quantum commitment to the version of you that already lives the life you desire. Faith is often misunderstood. It's treated as a kind of optimistic waiting, a vague trust that things might turn out well if you stay positive, believe in yourself, or hope hard enough. But in Murphy's model, faith has nothing to do with passivity, and absolutely nothing to do with hoping. Faith, to Joseph Murphy, was the activation key for timeline collapse. And that key doesn't work unless the signal is unwavering. Faith is not a wish. It is the quantum commitment to a specific identity. A firm, coherent, and emotionally grounded decision that you are already the version of yourself who has the outcome. Not becoming it. Not moving toward it. Being it now. Murphy was explicit about this. He wrote, "Faith is the ability to see the invisible and believe in the incredible. And that is what enables believers to receive the impossible." This isn't religious. It's signal stabilization. Let's break it down. In the quantum model, you exist across multiple timelines. Each version of you has a different frequency signature. Each outcome you desire already exists in some version of that structure. Faith, then, is the internal act of selecting a timeline and refusing to waver from it. Not because you see evidence, but because the signal you emit is more real than the current conditions. That signal has to become your center of gravity. And that's where most people fail. They confuse faith with belief. But belief can be fleeting. Faith is structural. It doesn't flicker when things appear unchanged. It doesn't dissolve when discomfort arises. It holds the frequency no matter what. That holding is the mechanism. When your system holds a signal long enough without contradiction, doubt, or emotional retraction, the quantum field locks on. Probability collapses. And what was once potential becomes reality. Murphy knew this. He described faith as a mental and emotional attitude. So inner conviction becomes outer experience. He didn't tell people to wait for confirmation. He told them to live from conviction before confirmation arrived. That is quantum entrainment. Entrainment happens when one system begins to match the rhythm or frequency of another. In your case, your internal state begins to entrain your external world. But that only happens if the internal state is stable. Faith is that stability. Let's get even more precise. Faith, as Murphy described it, is not passive. It's active. It's the decision to maintain emotional resonance with the outcome, even in the face of absence, contradiction, or challenge. This emotional resonance creates a consistent signal. The subconscious picks up on that consistency and begins adjusting your behavior, your reactions, your posture, and your perception. You stop looking for signs. You stop doubting. You stop needing proof. Because the identity has already shifted. That's what faith really is. It's a non-negotiable commitment to being the version of yourself that aligns with the outcome. No fallback plans. No contingency mindset. No emotional backpedaling. This is not recklessness. It's frequency anchoring. Murphy was a master of this. He said the subconscious would never reject a belief that was accepted as already true. He warned that begging, worrying, or checking for results would only delay manifestation, because those behaviors signal doubt. And doubt is not neutral. Doubt is a contradictory broadcast. So when you say, "I know this is happening," but your emotions say, "I'm afraid it won't," the field receives a broken signal. Faith is the elimination of that break. It's a steady pulse, a rhythmic, aligned transmission that says, "This is who I am now. This is what I experience now. This is what my life reflects now. Murphy wrote, "Change your concept of yourself and you will automatically change the outer world." This is the formula. Not hope, not struggle, not wishful waiting, but commitment and coherence. Let's ground this in an example. If your desired outcome is healing, faith means no longer referencing illness as your identity. You don't deny symptoms, but you stop making them part of your story. You align your attention with vitality. You feel from wellness. You speak from strength. That's faith. And as you maintain that frequency, your biology begins to reorganize. Your environment responds. You become a different node in the quantum network. One that reflects a new reality. This is not mindset. It's mechanics. Faith tells the field, we're not oscillating. We're not flinching. This is the frequency now. And the field responds because coherence always precedes collapse. So if you want to know whether you're living in faith, don't ask what you believe. Ask how consistent your frequency is. Do you return to doubt when the old story whispers? Do you retract when results delay? Do you flinch when circumstances test you? Or do you stabilize? Faith doesn't prevent testing. Faith outlasts testing. And when it does, reality catches up. Murphy's entire framework was built around this. He knew that nothing external needed to be changed first. Only internal resonance. Because once the internal was non-negotiable, the external had no choice but to mirror it. That's not ideology. That's the nature of the field. So let this replace every old belief you carried about faith. Faith is not passively believing something might happen. Faith is being so energetically certain that it already has. You no longer entertain any other signal. That's power. That's alignment. That's how the quantum field responds. Next we will enter the final synthesis. How to live this not as an idea or practice, but as an embodied system of self-regulation, identity design, and real-time frequency engineering. This isn't about belief anymore. You've seen how Joseph Murphy's teachings, long held in the domain of metaphysical spirituality, were actually pointing to something more structured, more exact, and more measurable than most realized. When you strip away the mystical terminology and decode his language through the lens of quantum logic, what emerges is not a philosophy of wishful optimism. What emerges is a toolkit. Murphy's methods form a complete model for self-evolution, rooted not in fantasy or hope, but in the mechanics of identity-based resonance. He didn't simply teach people to think positively, he taught them to broadcast coherently. He didn't tell people to wish for change, he taught them how to become change. And that's the threshold we now stand on. To live quantumly beyond belief is to graduate from intention to precision, from wishing to wiring, from waiting to waving, because consciousness, in its most functional form, is a wave that selects, aligns, and resolves. The life you want isn't something to chase. It's something to tune into, but that requires a different way of living. A new operating system. Let's get clear about what that means. Living quantumly is not about affirmations. It's not about rituals. It's not about holding a thought long enough that it finally comes true. It's about state fidelity. Your life is nothing but a feedback loop that reflects your dominant state. So your only job is this: maintain the state that matches the timeline you want, no matter what. That state includes your emotional baseline, identity narrative, somatic imprint, internal language, response pattern, perceptual lens. Everything else, the money, the relationship, the healing, the clarity, shows up as a result of that frequency. Not because the universe rewards you, not because you asked nicely, but because the quantum field collapses probability into form based on coherence. So if you want to live quantumly, you must become a master of identity regulation. Not mood regulation, not surface positivity. Identity. You wake up each day and choose which version of you is broadcasting, and then you stabilize that version. You override the nervous system signatures of the old self. You stop referencing the past as proof. You stop treating the desired outcome as future, and you anchor into the only timeline that matters, the one you commit to now. Murphy gave people instructions for this. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Impress the subconscious with conviction. Sleep in the mood of the answered prayer. These weren't spiritual exercises. These were frequency encodings. He was describing the daily discipline of conscious signal control. Because once your signal is set, the field handles the rest. Let's be practical. If you want to live from quantum precision rather than pop spirituality, you'll need to adopt 3 foundational behaviors. 1. Tune into states, not scripts. Stop reciting mantras hoping they'll work. Start asking, what emotional state corresponds to this outcome? Then, reverse engineer it. If peace is what you seek, stop craving peace. Start living like someone who expects nothing, resists nothing, and releases quickly. Peace is a state, not a product. You align with it, not attract it. If success is the desired experience, identify the emotional structure of the version of you who already holds it. Not just confidence, but certainty. Not just work ethic, but calm authority. That version of you emits a different frequency than the one who's striving and chasing. Choose the version with the more precise signature and embody it. 2. Calibrate identity with intentional precision. You are never neutral. You are always broadcasting some version of yourself into the field. So if you're not selecting your identity, your history is. Living quantumly means designing identity deliberately from the inside out. This involves more than thought. It includes posture, language, micro-choices, and response conditioning. If the version of you who lives in your preferred timeline walks differently, speaks differently, breathes differently, you must mirror that now. Murphy wasn't interested in theory. He wanted people to live it. He taught that the subconscious accepts what is repeated with emotion and felt truth. So identity isn't an idea. It's a feeling practiced into permanence. Your system adapts to what's rehearsed. Every time you return to the old self through fear, story, or reactivity, you delay the collapse of the new timeline. But every time you return to the identity that already holds your outcome, you reinforce it. You stabilize it. And the field eventually yields to it. 3. Engineer consciousness like a resonance system. Don't treat the mind like a foggy battleground. Treat it like an instrument, one that must be tuned daily, deliberately, and skillfully. This means curating your environment, your inputs, your conversations, and your internal narratives to support a singular goal: signal clarity. You don't have time for emotional static. You don't have space for ambiguity. Every vibration you entertain either reinforces your signal or corrupts it. This isn't about paranoia. It's about engineering. Murphy spoke about the power of impressing the subconscious. In practice, this means structuring your days to reinforce the feeling of the outcome. You live from the identity, not just towards it. You filter every decision through this question. Does this action match the frequency of the version of me who already lives this reality? If yes, reinforce it. If no, release it. This is how the quantum self operates. It's not hopeful. It's deliberate. It's not reactive. It's grounded. It's not waiting. It's transmitting. And eventually the field bends, not because you pushed it, but because it has no choice but to reflect back the signal that no longer changes. That is how change becomes inevitable. That is how timelines become responsive. That is how outcomes become ordinary. Murphy didn't need particle physics to teach this. He just needed people to feel it deeply enough to live it. He said, "Your subconscious mind is a recording machine which reproduces your habitual thinking. Think good and good follows." He wasn't talking about wishful thinking. He was talking about systemic coherence. Your thoughts, emotions, identity, and behaviors form a loop. The more synchronized they are around a single state, the stronger your field signal becomes. That signal determines which version of reality collapses into form. It's not about effort. It's about resonance selection. So here's the truth. You are not here to manifest desires. You are here to resolve frequencies. You are here to master alignment. You are here to live inside a system of creation so intelligent, it reflects you before you even speak. But only if you speak with consistency. Only if you choose without contradiction. Only if you stabilize the self that belongs to the timeline you want. This is the quantum side of Joseph Murphy's teachings. Not mysticism, not magic, not motivational soundbites, but mechanics of mind, precision of identity, transmission of frequency, and above all, the silent, resolute commitment to becoming the signal before the world catches up. You've already seen how it works. Now, live it.